Welcome back, guys, to the Grateful Living podcast. I am so thankful to have Jon Feinman. Jon is the founder and executive director of InnerCity Weightlifting, a nonprofit that helps at-risk youth by providing meaningful career tracks in and beyond personal training. Jon, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So let's go back to the beginning. Talk to me about where you grew up. Maybe your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
Grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts. I was born in 1983. And Amherst is very much this politically correct college town. Most people have their master's degree. It's education focused. I grew up in a household where both parents had master's degrees. Both parents were together. We were by no means in the upper class, but we were also nowhere near living in poverty. I never had to worry about food. We take 2 vacations at least a year. Growing up, I was very much, sports would run my life, especially soccer. I think it was seldom that you would find me anywhere other than outside running around, creating a mess and ultimately pissing my parents off for how dirty I'd make the house afterwards.
Yeah.
And all the mud I'd track in. Looking back on it now, I think soccer gave me this incredible experience of different cultures. Growing up, one of my best friends was an Ethiopian refugee. Another person I played soccer with was from Cambodia, and I ended up playing on his Cambodian team in summer tournaments. And even just something like that, look back on it, you show up and it's one, I'm the only white person there, or one of just a few. Yeah. 2, it's not hamburgers and hot dogs. It's satay and just a different cultural experience, which I think I took for granted at the time, but also look back on it and just had a profound impact on my view of the world as a result. After high school, I went to Bryant University, played soccer there.
Can I just stop you for a second?
Yep.
So you said your parents worked together? Was that?
Yep.
They were entrepreneurs themselves as well?
No, so they were actually both psychologists. So, insert whatever jokes about being raised by a psychologist as well. Somehow I think I made it out okay, but
so were you introduced to entrepreneurship at all growing up, or that wasn't really on your radar at all?
No, I don't even think I fully understood what entrepreneurship was or meant until college. Yeah. And starting to look at different schools. And at the time, even undergrad, I remember looking at Babson. And I think that's the first time I really started to even just understand the term. And it became more of a common term for me. So I played soccer at Bryant all 4 years. And afterwards, I really wanted to stay involved in sports. I was looking more at careers in sports management and marketing. There were no jobs that graduated in 2005, and there were no jobs that really excited me, or that I was able to get anyway. So I did a year of AmeriCorps in this program. I apologize if you can hear my wife's 5-pound Yorkie, who thinks she's a lot bigger and louder than she actually is.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey, Misha, here she is.
Hey.
That's awesome. So I really wanted to stay involved in sports. I had this program called Athletes in Service to America. It was under the AmeriCorps umbrella. You go through the training and they talk about the impact you're going to have and kind of these devastating situations that people are in and the trauma that they're experiencing. And I get to the school in East Boston. It was K-8, certainly an area that was experiencing a lot more challenges than many others in terms of economics, in terms of violence and educational achievement. And I get there and I kind of realized very early on that while people are growing up without many of the advantages I had, including just the fact that I'm a white man.
Yeah.
They were making the right decisions and taking advantage of the many great programs out there. And it happened to be through soccer that I almost unintentionally met some people in a group called MS-13, which is kind of known as this notorious gang. And it's through soccer I had this opportunity to get to meet them as people, not as scary statistics or stereotypes.
Yeah.
And even as I was getting to know some of the guys a little bit better, people are telling me, what are you doing? Don't go near them. They're too dangerous. Don't even waste your time. They're not going to change.
Yeah.
And growing up in this politically correct college town, I started to, for the first time, and again, this is a privilege of me that this is the first time I experienced this, I started to see this overwhelming amount of racism and segregation play out.
Yeah.
And these narratives built on fear that would leave people in communities without resources because everyone just avoided them, and then perpetuate the cycle of violence. And then that violence then goes and reinforces this narrative of fear that then becomes used to fuel mass incarceration.
Yeah.
And so it was through this experience that I realized a few things. One, there was this confusion between lack of care and lack of hope. So people told me they don't care, they're not going to change. I saw people willing to lose their lives to a bullet or jail because they cared for each other.
Yeah.
And so it was lacking. It was not care, it was hope for an alternative path.
Yeah.
I saw people where as I grew up, knowing very few people who didn't get their master's degree.
Yeah.
Saw people growing up where they knew very few people that didn't go to jail.
Yeah.
And just these complete opposite worlds. And yet the world I grew up in and came from, that was the world that was dictating the rules for people in communities that we don't understand.
Yeah. And
their voices aren't heard or recognized, and we take away their agency because they go to jail and now they're just a criminal.
Yeah.
And so it really, I think, sparked something inside me just by knowing how wrong we as a society are about this population, and also just seeing how when you write off this population as gang members and thugs, it's now that much easier to write off the person next to them.
Yeah.
And then the person who looks like them. And you see racism play out time and time again in very obvious ways, but perhaps worse in all these subtle ways that we're all a part of, including myself, whether we like it or not. And the only answer to that is an openness to become aware of our own roles in it, and to listen and to value people. So after that year of AmeriCorps, I had this incredible experience. I realized that I didn't change anyone, but people changed me.
Yeah. So
and
you were a teacher there?
So I was a AmeriCorps member. So during the day, I was helping out with some of the physical education classes. I was a tutor in a couple classes. I was running recess programs and after-school sport-based activity.
Yeah.
So that was actually my role there. What I ended up taking away from it was very different.
Yeah.
And then after that year, I became a personal trainer. I went from an AmeriCorps stipend of $800 a month and trying to live in Boston, which I think is like the third most expensive city to live in, to making $120K a year at the age of 23. So that was a really nice change up for me. And I loved personal training. But within a couple of years, I also felt like I just hit the ceiling. I had 56 sessions in my schedule each week. Thank God some people would reschedule, so I'd have some time.
Yeah.
And it just started getting me questioning, like, is this just what I'm going to do for the next, 40, 50 years of my life?
Yeah.
It was actually one of my personal training clients who I started talking to and asked me, I think she even said, you strike me more as an entrepreneur. And that was the first time I ever even thought, maybe I should start my own business.
Yeah.
And I started talking to her about Alexa, one of the people I'd worked with. And this idea how weight training could be used as this medium to work with people, where from my experience during that year, too often just about every door was shut on them because, again, they were labeled gang members. They were too dangerous. This use of fear, again, playing out in so many different ways to just keep people oppressed.
Yeah.
And so, I knew I had no clue how to run a business, not where I'm leading other people.
Yeah.
I also had no clue how to launch and run a sustainable nonprofit. So I went to Babson to get my MBA, which is certainly one of the best decisions I think I've made.
Yeah.
Also, I could realize the oxymoron of a sustainable nonprofit. We're legally unsustainable. It's why we're a nonprofit. So, when we talk about sustainability, it's talking about sustainable ways of raising revenue, both earned income and philanthropy.
So going into Babson, did you have this idea in mind that I'm going to start a business or a nonprofit, or were you?
Yeah, I actually wrote my grad school essays about this concept.
Awesome.
So, and actually about Alexin, and at that point in time, I had lost touch with him too. But just kind of one essay was about, what might have happened to him. Was he alive? Was he in jail? Was he doing well? Was he struggling? And used my last semester at Babson in the spring of 2010 to launch just a completely bootstrap pilot model of ICW. Yeah. Got some donated gym space 3 times a week and started to figure out what this was actually going to look like.
For someone that's, maybe looking to start a nonprofit, what were some things you did right, and what were some things you may you would change if you could do it again?
I think the things I did
was at that time of the pilot, was that an official nonprofit?
Yep. So we applied for our 501c3, and I think again something that we see playing out now with ICW as we grow. This field of personal training, it put me in touch with my initial board of directors. It put me in touch with the CEO of an accounting firm who helped us get our 501c3. Put us in touch with a lawyer who helped us get all of our bylaws together and joined our board.
Awesome.
So I think some of the things that I did well, I wrote a business plan, but I didn't use that business plan as gospel. That business plan was more of just a thinking exercise. What I used was a 2-page summary of what we're going to do. And perhaps most important, it wasn't about what was on that page and trying to make that happen. It was about listening to the people we were working with and having them adapt what that page was. Yeah. So initially, this whole model, this whole program started off as elite weight training services for people who couldn't afford it, specifically people involved in street violence.
Gotcha.
And we talked about getting people into the Olympics and college athletic scholarships.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're doing the work. We've got people who are shot and paralyzed, people going in and out of jail. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have people that get killed. The idea that elite weight training services was somehow going to do something was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But what was working was we gave ourselves an excuse to reach out to someone who society otherwise told us to avoid. Yeah. 3 times a week initially to say, hey, I'm working out at 3, you want to join? And it gave way to this 4-stage model we have today. The first stage is trust. That connection, that point of contact, it allowed us to go out there and not say, you have to trust me. Yeah. It's instead, I'm going to earn your trust.
Gotcha.
And have these conversations that oftentimes have nothing to do about weight training. It's more about, oh, I'd love to, but I can't get there. All right, well, we'll pick you up. Yeah. As our guys, they can't get around the city safely often. Other people, they might have access to transportation, but they don't have a license or an ID. We'll bring you the RMV and we'll pay for that for you. Yeah. So the first stage was all about trust. The second stage was about hope. And that was really important because we kept getting questions from funders about, what are you doing for education? What are you doing for careers? For someone whose 6-month outlook on life is death or jail, they want an education. They want a career. Yeah. But that's not the priority. It wouldn't be the priority for any of us if the struggles that we were facing each and every day outweighed this kind of distant gratification and benefit. It's simple. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. And then we thought through this career and personal training, it was going to generate economic mobility, and certainly it does. But we realized there was something happening between hope and economic mobility. And that was this bridging of social capital. It was this flipping of power dynamics between this very affluent clientele that pays for personal training and the people in our program who are too often othered and labeled as less than and criminals and thugs.
Yeah.
And now they're the expert, they're the professional. And through this hour-long workout, there's also conversation happening where people are just getting to know each other. And that impact is going both ways, where the people in our program are getting access to new networks and opportunities. At the same time, they're changing the narrative about who they are and where they come from. They're gaining voice and agency, and our clients in turn are looking at them as the experts, as people who have valuable thoughts, which sadly just is not the starting point. It should be, but it's not. And we see that play out today. And then ultimately from there, all of a sudden you gain economic mobility, but it's no longer just a career in personal training. It's our clients providing job opportunities for the people in our program and their family members and friends. Wow. And so you end up having this much greater ripple effect. Yeah. And so I think all that to say kind of what I did well was listen and adapt to reflect the voice of the people living the lives, the people that we wanted to work with. Yeah. What I didn't do well, and I mean, I'm sure this is just about everyone, I don't think I prioritized the importance of people. Okay. You know, nothing's going to grow beyond just a program and into a true organization without getting the right people and the right team around you. Gotcha. And it's hard to do that as a bootstrap. You know, I think I was lucky initially with the board for myself, but I don't think I paid enough attention to what was the team and who was on the team that we were going to grow, and then how do we support them. You know, so I think we've certainly made a lot of improvements, but I think that's always going to be a challenge for any company, not just a nonprofit.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, did you fundraise initially? I mean, what was the business model? Like, how did you get the financial capital, if that, or I know you just said you bootstrapped it. So did you not take in?
Well, so we launched without a bank account and without a dollar. Okay. We got some funding maybe about 3 or 4 months in. I think it's really important too, is that especially in the nonprofit space, it's all about, you know, if we only had money, we could do this and that. Yeah. There's never going to be enough money. I mean, the issues we're working on, or should be working on anyway, in the nonprofit, they're not small. Yeah. It's why no for-profit or very few for-profits have really taken it on. These are big issues. And so there's never going to be enough money. There's never going to be enough resources. Our job as leaders in this sector is to do the work anyway. To not say, oh, I would really like to end street violence, but I just don't have enough money to do that. Yeah. We never will. Yeah. But we got to find ways anyway. Yeah. So that bootstrap pilot model allowed us to get off the ground and not just take a piece of paper to people, but instead say, look, here's what we're doing, and here's how your money can help us do more. Gotcha. And it became a very different conversation. We ended up raising $75K that first year, all through philanthropy. The next year it was like $256,000, then $545,000, then $750,000, and then over $1 million ever since. And the last 2 years, over $2 million.
Gotcha. Did you have a board from the beginning?
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha. Can you talk about, you know, the impact of them and what is their value when you're starting out?
Yeah, so initially it was a way just to get some leaders that I admired around me more, you know, people that I wanted to learn from. You know, certainly those are also people that had some economic means and connections, but early on it was going to be a group that could do two things. Help grow and support me. At the time I was a 26-year-old leader of this organization and without any experience leading any other organization. Yeah. And so I need to lean on people for the challenges I was going to come up against to learn. And at the same time, from the outside looking in, you know, why should a funder give money to this unproven organization, this unproven leader? So it's also to get a board around me that funder could say, oh, well, Ann Morris is on that board. Grant Freeland is on that board. He's got the right people around him. Yeah. To make sure that they can get past those challenges. So that was really what the board started as.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about like what the pilot was and how many students and things like that? How were you, measuring success at that time, at the beginning?
We started really small. It was 4 people, 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Within the first maybe month and a half, we started Saturday workouts at a juvenile prison for people serving gun-related crimes. And then, word just started to grow. We were showing up at court for some of the guys, and through showing up at court, all of a sudden you start to meet more groups that are working with similar populations. And some of the people we were working with, they weren't involved in any other organization. So all of a sudden you had people who were working with someone who previously didn't take to another program. And this was something that for some of the guys became of interest. And so we started to develop both word of mouth and this referral network. And by the end of March, we had over 50 people. And by the end of that first year, wow. We were working with, I think, close to 100 people.
Wow. So it seems like people were pretty receptive to the idea from both, from a client perspective and from a donor perspective. Like there wasn't a lot of backlash on, the model that you were trying to accomplish.
Well, so, we've been protested. We've actually in our second year lost $90,000 as we got protests out of South Boston. And I think we're working with the population that, as I learned in that year of AmeriCorps, very few people and groups were willing to work with outside of the arm of law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so I think there were actually a lot of people that were skeptical. And again, it goes back to the importance of not showing people a piece of paper, but being able to invite people into a gym to see what we're doing, to meet people. And when you meet the people in our program, especially for someone like me who prior to this never knew anyone that went to jail, or at least prior to my year of AmeriCorps, you're forced to confront some of your false perceptions, some of the beliefs you had because of where you grew up. They're now confronted because now you know someone who statistically you're supposed to be afraid of, and instead you actually see that it's someone who's trying to persevere through challenges most of us have never had to.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of skeptics, but actually doing the work allowed us to convert some, but certainly not all, and probably never all people.
Yeah. So after that pilot year, what was the plan? Or what ended up happening?
So at the end of that year, in a very good way, we outgrew the space that we were borrowing.
Awesome.
So that put us on a search for our own gym. We're also collaborating with a couple other partners, and they loved us when we showed up with 3 to 5 people. When we showed up with 10 to 15, it became too much. So it put us on the hunt for our own space, which kind of talked a little bit about the protests we got into or that people had against us in 2011. And ultimately, we're never able to get an occupancy permit. In 2012, we were finally able to open up our first space in Dorchester. And that, for the first time, also gave us our ability not just to get people certified as trainers, but to launch our own certification, our own personal training business within our gyms and start to generate earned revenue and internal job placement for people. So that was a kind of big inflection point.
Yeah.
And it was slow. A lot of people, they didn't want to come to Dorchester and train with our guys for personal training because of all the fears.
Yeah.
And yet slowly, as people started to do it, they started to not just get a great workout, but this amazing experience that profoundly changed their worldview. And because of that, they were now willing to travel 45, 60 minutes to get to the gym. And that gave us our kind of next initiative of, all right, it's going well in Dorchester. The main complaint we're getting is that people wish we were more conveniently located.
Can you talk a little bit? I mean, because that's a big part of this solution is getting the clientele to pay for these training workouts and things like that. I mean, how much of a struggle was that to get, a Microsoft executive or something like that to buy in?
Yeah, initially we kind of just looked at it as a spectrum. On one side, you had the socially conscious person where this is just a deeply held belief that they want to be part of this social cause. So they'll come to the gym.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they'll also be friends with people in the middle, people who are hesitant and aren't going to come on their own, but they'll come if their friends are. And so we leverage that group to reach the people in the middle, not the people all the way on the extreme end where that's the most dangerous program and the most dangerous place. No way I'm going there. We're not going to be able to reach that group, not ourselves.
Yeah.
But those people in the middle, the people that were hesitant, they're the people that came in and it challenged their beliefs. It challenged their worldview.
Yeah.
And they left with not just a new understanding, but new compassion for people that they now know. And that group is able to be our best ambassadors. They can reach people closer towards the end of that extreme side of the spectrum where they can actually have those conversations and get someone open, not just to a great workout, but to this cause and the people we're working with. And it becomes this kind of really unique value proposition. Come to our gym and change your life while changing your own.
Yeah.
Give someone an opportunity to make money and access new opportunities. And at the same time, that person's going to change your life, not just physically, but socially and emotionally as well.
Did you, on the flip side, did you have any, it doesn't sound like you had a ton of trouble, but did you have trouble convincing, people of high risk youth to join, to take a chance on you and were they, especially in those early years, what were you, is it, you'll be a personal certified trainer from this and you'll be able to make a decent, what was the message to convince, because now it's a little easier, you're 10 years in, but you're year 1, 2, 3, I assume it was, they hadn't heard of you, they have no prior relationship with you maybe.
Yeah, initially, and again, I think this is something, it goes back to, I didn't write this business plan and be like, this is the way it's going to go. It was a helpful thought exercise. But initially, the proposition actually wasn't anything about the program. It was more about, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And it's empowering to ask someone for advice.
Yeah.
Immediately, and this was not necessarily my intention at the time. I didn't know this was the case. But it immediately started going against the traditional view that, these people are less than, need to be mentored by us who have achieved a higher education.
Yeah.
So the idea of asking someone for their input, it was empowering.
Yeah.
It again, without me knowing it, it gave someone voice and agency. It gave people value. It showed that we as an organization, as individuals, value them.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things early on that were just so simple and yet weren't happening in most organizations. One being, we'd constantly get a question, how do you get the guys to the gym? There's a lot of programs that want to work with this population, but they just can't get them to show up. And every time I just say, well, we pick them up.
Yeah.
And that was something that everyone's like, whoa, are you being safe? How dare you go there? It's like,
yeah.
You want to help this population, yet you won't deign to go to their neighborhood. Like, who?
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're not going to get close to the issues, then don't try to don't try to help someone. Help yourself first.
Yeah.
And so that was the initial message, and it wasn't like things happened overnight. There's some people that it was like 6 months of getting in touch with before they finally came to the gym, and even today that's still the same case.
Yeah.
Not as much, because now so much more is word of mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. That first stage very quickly and apparently became trust, and not They have to earn our trust. We have to earn theirs.
What was their commitment level in terms, like, was it a full-time, I mean, or they're coming in 3 times a week, I think you said? What was their commitment level in terms of hours and things like that?
You know, from our perspective, if they want to come once a day, once a week, once a month, once a year, it's a victory in our book.
Yeah.
So it's entirely up to the person.
Yeah.
Again, our job, if they're interested, is simply to continue to be there. Gotcha. for when they want to come in, when they want a kind of peer or partner to help think through a challenge that they're solving and tap into a larger network.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes we see it being the need for IDs or the need for safe and stable housing, need for food. You know, a lot of just really fundamental needs that I think too often as we as a society, as we create organizations and opportunities for people, we overlook the fact that you don't get to take advantage of that opportunity if you can't eat. You know, if you can't take care of that basic level of Maslow's hierarchy, you don't get to the next one.
Yeah. In the first couple of years, were you on your own, or did you have employees, things like that?
So initially started with a group of people who I worked out with. I used to, just on an amateur level, compete in Olympic lifting. Gotcha. So it was myself and a few people I worked out with. My brother as well was there for every practice and kind of quickly took on more of a chief program officer role to help with that. So I don't think anything I've ever done has been alone. You know, and I think you look at, you know, we have social capital as one of the stages of our model. The only reason I've been able to do anything I have has been because people along the way that I've met, that even just someone saying, you strike me as more of an entrepreneur. Had Francis and Ann not said that to me, I may never have started this organization. So, yeah, nothing I've done has been alone. Nothing we've done as an organization has been alone. It's always been because of people around us, whether they were paid or unpaid. But initially, you know, all of us were just volunteers. Like I said, we started without a bank account or a dollar.
Got it. So sorry, I think I cut you off a little bit ago, but you were talking about, I guess you were finding the gym space, the new gym space, because you were outgrowing the old one. You want to continue from there?
Yeah. So in 2011, we signed a lease on a space in South Boston. You know, legally, everything was zoned correctly.
Yeah. We
had every right to be there. A couple months in, as we're starting to do the build out, this protest erupts. You know, we're importing gang and gun violence, and it's that same use of fear to criminalize people of color.
Yeah.
That then leads to this hysteria. And look, this is what makes it so dangerous as a tool of racism and systemic oppression, is that it is logical to fear violence. What's illogical is to generalize that to an entire group of people and not try to understand how did we arrive here in the first place, and who's actually involved versus who are we just afraid of because they're Black. Yeah. I mean, look at the phone call in Central Park just last week, Amy Cooper. Yeah. If she's afraid for her life, what does it matter to add in an African-American man? That is racism playing out. And the saddest part is she might not even know it. It is hardwired into us as a society. And it's been hardwired ever since slavery. Yeah. And until we reconcile that, nothing's going to change. Yeah. Not in any meaningful way. And so we go into these protests and people are afraid that the guys in our program will walk up the street and rape them. Yeah. People are talking about, like I said, importing gang and gun violence, as if Whitey Bulger did not come from South Boston. Yeah. It's insane, and it follows very little logic when you start to actually look at it. Yeah. And yet there is this understandable fear that people have of violence. The problem is that violence has been used as a weapon for racism, or weaponized in systemic racism. So after about 9 months of trying to open up, it becomes apparent that not only are we not going to get our occupancy permit, but we're also getting threats that people are going to call the police on the people in our program and plant stuff on them. And it just became clear that not only were we not legally going to be able to open up there because the local incumbent politicians had blocked that, but it's not even going to be a safe place for the people in our program to go, which again is segregation. Yeah. We and they have every legal right to be there.
Yeah.
And the conversation was never about how do we make this work in a way that provides opportunity and safety for all.
Yeah.
It was a conversation about keep doing the work, don't do it here. That's a conversation about segregation. People just won't look internally and say that. And again, very little will change until that we're able to look inward.
Yeah.
And listen and value people that have been marginalized.
Yeah.
So after that, we went on this quick hunt for space, opened up our current location in Dorchester as our headquarters, and we're able to start to implement that personal training part of the program, the in-house personal training business that generated earned revenue and new clients and donors from it.
So I guess what are the as you're becoming like not more legitimate, but like as you're growing, what were some of the things that you made changes to? Did you start messaging it differently? Did you pivot to from where you initially thought it was going to be in 2010, 11?
Yeah, initially, like I said, we thought we were just going to be this elite weight training program. Yeah. We then quickly realized that weight training mattered very little, except for that it was the medium to connect those 4 stages: trust, in terms of giving us an excuse to reach out; hope, in terms of giving us a place to deepen relationships and put more options and true access to opportunity on the table; give us a career that could bridge social capital and create economic mobility. So the first pivot was really away from, as our name would suggest, we're not a weightlifting program.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and at that point, probably around like 2011, 2012, we became more of a workforce development program.
Gotcha.
And then when we opened up in Kendall Square in 2015, that was really to test that social capital side of the model, and specifically not just giving people in our program access to new opportunities and networks, but their ability to gain voice and agency to change the way society views the people in our program, and ideally gains the ability to look inward at how we are playing into a lot of these systems.
Yeah.
And so now we've kind of adapted from simply this, the Yorkie is barking again. Yeah, no, I apologize. The joys of the virtual world.
Yeah.
And so we went from this weight training program to workforce development program, yeah, to now really looking to be part of a much greater movement and play some role in that by doing more of what we already do, but being purposeful about leveraging that as a platform for people to gain voice and agency.
What's the biggest thing that you did that allowed you guys to scale the way you have?
Listen.
Okay.
Is simply listen to the people in our program. And the sad part is, sorry, this is what I'm dealing with right now.
Hey, you're
She's
good.
Like right over my shoulder barking at me. There you go. So, I think again, from what I saw, even today, too many times, the very people trying to help, they're not listening. They're solving from their perspective, the perspective of we who have achieved education, and that is just not the right perspective.
Yeah.
It's not wrong, but it's not the perspective that should carry the most weight. We got to listen to people who are living those issues they know much better than we do. And by listening, I mean, I don't even know if I still have it, but that original business plan is completely foolish. It's everything a white guy from Amherst would think would work.
Yeah.
And yet had almost nothing in it that did work.
Yeah.
And the reason we made the switches is we listened.
Yeah. Can you talk about, you know, I guess some of the workforce development programs you've made partnerships with companies like Microsoft and things like that, where, you know, people that go through the program can then possibly, you know, get a job at one of these companies?
Yeah, you know, so I think one of the things, and it's very nuanced, but one of the things that makes us different is that we don't have this very set and structured overall program.
Okay.
You know, it's really defined in those 4 stages that I mentioned: trust, hope, social capital, economic mobility. The certifications, yes, those are structured.
Yeah.
But it's not as if someone goes through it and automatically gets a job somewhere else. There are a couple partners we have, like Gymit, like YMCA, certainly our own gyms that hire people from our program. But initially, what we discovered within that I think first or second year, we had an internship set up at kind of a high-end gym, right? One of the most high-end gyms. And the 2 trainers that we had over there got kicked out, not because they did anything wrong, but one of the members complained about them having a GPS bracelet on. And so we quickly realized that working with this population, until there's true reform, and when I say reform, it's not just the justice system, and that definitely needs to be reformed. It's us as a society and the way we look at people.
Yeah.
That also needs to be reformed. But we realize that the way someone's going to gain advantages is through social capital.
Yeah.
And as a example, we had one person in our program, been in our program for several years. He applied for a job at Boston Medical Center and got held up because he had a quarry.
Yeah.
One of our clients knew the head of that department, set up a coffee, he gets hired the next day.
Yeah.
If it weren't for that connection,
yeah,
he doesn't end up with that job.
Yeah.
And we've seen that play out time and time again. So the way people in our program end up with jobs at these major institutions, it comes from our clients, it comes from people who know them and can help other people see past a piece of paper and a statistic and instead come to know a person.
Can you talk about some, you know, students of yours that you're proud of, just to give all of us in the audience some perspective on, you know, how far they've come and things like that in their growth? Yeah,
I mean, so we've got 199 people in the program right now, across the 4 stages, and there's not a single person in there that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
You know, even the people that we are still trying to earn their trust, the fact that they've just expressed interest, the reason why I find that so powerful is in a world that has told them they are not valued, that they are a criminal,
yeah,
that they're a gang member, a thug, that we don't care about you. In that world, they have the courage to say, I'm going to try anyway. Yeah. No, the cards I've been dealt are not fair. The challenges I'm going to come up against are going to be much more severe than they will be for almost all. And yet, I'm going to take a chance and go to this organization, this program, and participate. So that alone to me is a success, and for all those reasons. But then I think you get so many other things along the way. We've had people take the first vacation they've ever taken in their lives. Yeah. So Joe is someone at the age of 23, it was the first time he'd ever been on a plane.
Wow. Yeah.
And his kind of seeing the world differently from that. You've got people that they pay rent for the first time ever and actually have stable housing.
Yeah.
You've got someone like Dan, who has been through more trauma than you know. I don't know how to put a number to how many people combined. Yeah. And he's working in the electrical union. You know, he's a fan of calculus. This is the longest period of time he's ever been out of jail.
Yeah.
you've got a whole lot more people that they make it out of jail just one day longer than they ever have before.
Yeah.
And to me, all those are success stories, and not just on the economic mobility side, that's good and great, but that doesn't happen overnight. And there's these much smaller, and I actually think more meaningful success stories that happen along the way.
Yeah. What's, I guess at this stage, what's the hardest thing about running a nonprofit?
Just one thing.
Or hardest things.
Yeah, so our goal, my goal, and our goal is to take this national. And I think the hardest thing is, how do you scale a model that is actually incredibly simple, but so hard to execute because it's relationship based? Yeah. It's not a curriculum that we just implement in Baltimore, St. Louis, and Chicago.
Yeah.
It's how do we identify the right people to do it the same way we would, to bring them to Boston, train them right, to support people through the really difficult parts of this work. Our personal training clients, they come to the gym and they're moved.
Yeah.
They get a great workout. They get to be a part of a social cause.
Yeah.
Our staff, that's our day most of the day. But we're also there when someone's in the hospital, they just got shot, when someone in our program gets killed, when a friend of someone in our program gets killed, when someone goes to jail for the rest of their life. Yeah. Those are tough moments. Yeah. And everywhere in between, when someone comes into the gym and whatever might have happened that day or the night before. How do we support people through that? I'd be lying if I said I know the answer. I just know we need to figure out ways to do it.
Yeah. What are some of the things that that make it fulfilling, and you come out, you're like, this is why I do this every day?
I mean, every time I'm in the gym and I'm either, well, hopefully winning at chess, most often losing. That's 99% of my day. It's waking up to a text from one of our guys this morning, following the events of the last few days, and talking with him and getting his perspective. Yeah. And also, what makes that so powerful is that this is someone who, up until a few years ago, was completely written off by society. He didn't care about any of this stuff, and he'll say that. Today, he's got voice and agency, and now he is following politics. He's following current events. He feels like that his voice matters. And it's so sad that that wasn't always the case. Yeah. But it also highlights the issue. And I think there's just, I go to the gym and see people laughing, smiling. Now in the virtual world, we've got people in our program training their clients and meeting their families, because these workouts are now essentially happening in people's homes. Yeah. And it's creating this more, while it's virtual, and certainly not in person, in many ways it's more intimate, because now you're in each other's homes. Yeah. And you see all these systemic issues falling apart because people know each other. They had a reason to connect when the whole world said don't. Yeah. And I mean, I guess there's just like there's no one thing that's a challenge. Yeah. there's no one thing that keeps me motivated and then keeps me excited about what I get to see. Can you
talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so programmatically, I'm really proud of our team. We made the switch to virtual training. Initially, it was really all focused on, let's just stabilize. Let's keep our clients engaged. Let's get the virtual training sessions going. Let's do the virtual corporate workouts. And then within a few weeks, all of a sudden, we're training not just the John Hancock offices in Boston, but the John Hancock offices in Canada. Yeah. Not just BCG in Boston, but their offices in Chicago and New York City. Philips, they had some of their team from Switzerland join in. Wow. We're signing up clients in San Francisco. It's these in-person restrictions that come with many benefits. Having those lifted essentially allowed us to go national as of March 24th. Yeah. And programmatically, it's, some of it's always going to be in person. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But being able to implement more structured case management practices to help people get connected with the benefits and resources that are out there, to keep those 4 stages of the model going, not just in person, but virtually. It'll make us much stronger when the gym is able to fully open back. Because now it's not just when someone's in the gym, it's all the times in between that we're going to be that much more connected and that much better at being able to simply be there by someone's side so that they don't have to be alone in solving their challenges. Because the truth is, we can't solve it for anyone. Yeah, we can buy someone's ID, we can take care of some small stuff. But those chronic issues, there's no one person or group that can do anything about it. You can only be there and be by someone's side and be a partner with them in that journey.
Cool. You mentioned a little bit about, last Monday night's events, with George Floyd. Can you, for someone, who may not view, high-risk youth, former prisoners, people like that with the highest of, positivity, how can you help, how can you talk to them about maybe some of the misconceptions and how they're viewing, people in this group, and, maybe some of the things that you've learned, so they have a better understanding?
It's been several of the people in our program who have said that they didn't even know they were a gang member until they were in court and the judicial system told them they were.
Yeah.
And so I think as we look at what's playing out in the news and across the country, you have to look at the history of this country and how we got here. And so there's no one better than Brian Stevenson and Khalil Muhammad and the Netflix documentary 13th, but you look at what happened after slavery and all of a sudden, racial terror, lynching. Not only was it acceptable, it was encouraged by people in power.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden that's not appropriate. So now it's separate but equal. It's Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And all the promises that we made to people post-slavery never happened. And then all of a sudden, all right, segregation isn't okay anymore. But these are scary people. They're violent people. And then all of a sudden, and this has been there all along, this use of fear, this weaponized use of fear to perpetuate racism. And then it leads to mass incarceration. So what I would say is that for the people in our program, you can't judge someone based on one singular event. You got to look at how did that happen? What happened from the moment they were born? And all of a sudden you see this very different picture play out. You take someone like Trey, he's right now doing time in Big Sandy, a federal prison.
Yeah.
He, when asked about how he entered this world, very articulately talked about being 8 years old, eating Fruity Pebbles for dinner, thinking it was great because he loved that cereal, and walking by his mother's room and hearing her cry. He walked in, asked her why she's crying. She said, because I can't afford to put food on the table.
Yeah.
His next move is to support his family.
Yeah.
So he goes to the streets. And he's born on a street that we are, as a society, are told to avoid. It's dangerous. He meets people who understand what he's going through and help him get money. And those people have no other way to get money, or I want to say have no other way. They've had the same situations play out with them. So now all of a sudden he starts going to jail and getting in trouble for drugs. But now also because of what street he was on, he's told he's a gang member. And now all of a sudden he's got safety issues and concerns. So now all of a sudden it's not just drugs, now there's guns involved. And now something happens, and now there's this kind of hate for each other. And so you look at this person who, in the eyes of the law, is an armed career criminal, now doing 8 to 12 years.
Yeah.
In my eyes, he's an 8-year-old that loved his mother and tried to help out.
Yeah.
And if we can't look at that and understand how this system is being perpetuated, even if the people in charge have good intentions, it's not working. And it leads to not just this fear of someone with a gun, it leads to a fear of someone from a community. And it leads to this, from society standards, acceptable use of overwhelming force. And that's been playing out since day one of this country. Just now it's getting caught on an iPhone camera.
Yep.
And we're seeing that, oh, this isn't acceptable. But what we're not seeing is the everyday issues where we've had people in our program have seen this be called faggots by the police.
Yeah.
You're the police. How are you going to call them that? They've ripped checks out of our students' hands. We've had police talk about people in our program. And I want to be careful too to say these comments are not anti-police. They're anti-bad actions from certain police members.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've had some police talk about how some of the people in our program don't have an ounce of consciousness in their soul. That is not the person who's going to help prevent violence. That's the person that's going to antagonize violence. And these protests, it's not just George Floyd. It's not just what happened in Georgia.
Yeah.
It's that and all the big and small things that are happening on a daily basis. This, again, acceptable use by society standards of overwhelming force because these people, in quotes, are dangerous. And this is how this horrible system just continues to play out. And again, until we're able to look inward, until we're actually able to value people, and instead of confront a protest against overwhelming use of force with overwhelming use of force, it's nonsensical. Get in there and support the people. Make that change that's going to happen transparent, put a timeline on it, and do something about it. And then what you might see is people being willing to, I guess you might see things settle down some, but not until there's change. And sadly, if you look at history, enough time will go by, the next news cycle will come on, we'll forget. And whether it's 6 months from now or 6 years from now, there's going to be another thing caught on camera, and we're going to all look back and realize nothing changed. We had a bunch of people say, oh, it's a tragedy. We feel for you, and do nothing. It's time to do something.
Yeah. I think, and I assume you probably agree, I think that point about the environment that the individual is growing up in is so important. I mean, if you don't have a mom or dad or something like that, it can be easy at a young age to gravitate, into making bad choices, but that doesn't mean that they can't change and become a better person if they're given, structure and environment and, as you talked about, food and things like that. When those are taken care of, they can be productive members of society.
Yeah, I mean, I would even make the argument that they are productive members of society. We're the ones who aren't. we're the ones that are actually putting all the oppressions on them. Yeah. So we are actually the people who aren't productive. They're just they're fighting for equality. Yeah. They're fighting to get by.
Yeah.
The rest of us, intentionally or not, knowingly or not, sadly are playing into it. And that's how pervasive racism is, and why we're not going to get anywhere until we reconcile with the past. Yeah, it's nuanced, it's difficult, and at the same time, it's simple.
Yeah.
Listen. Start by listening.
Yeah.
And then do something.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on? I think we covered a lot, but
nothing on my end.
Okay.
But thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I want to thank you again, Jon, and I acknowledge all the good work that you're doing. I think that, you know, business and entrepreneurship can often get a bad rap. But, you know, I think that, you know, if people like you that change, you know, the way we view things, that change the culture, you're improving lives every day. And that's an awesome thing. For people that want to um, maybe support you guys, how can they do that?
I mean, a simple way right now is sign up for virtual training sessions. The money goes to our trainers. You get to be a part of the program. And the advantage of this virtual world is it no longer matters where you live or what time zone you're in.
Yeah.
So there's that. You know, sign up for our newsletters. We're a nonprofit. Feel free to donate if you'd like.
Yeah.
But I think more so is look inward on a lot of these issues and question what we think we know if we haven't actually talked to someone who's lived that life.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you again, Jon, for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.